A September night in 2009. The quiet Siberian district of Akademgorodok seemed absolutely peaceful. 28-year-old Irina Safonova was returning home after a late-night movie. Stepping into her apartment building, she truly believed she was completely safe, entirely unaware that the silence of this sleeping building would mark the beginning of a nightmare that would shock the entire country. Just half an hour later, a neighbor would call the elevator on the ground floor. The doors would slowly open, but inside there was nothing but an ominous emptiness. On the cold metal floor, the neighbor would find Irina's keys neatly covered by a junk mail newspaper. Of the young woman herself, there was no sign. No signs of a struggle. Not a single drop of blood. Not a single scream that could have been heard by the dozens of people sleeping behind the thin concrete walls. Irina had seemingly vanished into thin air,
in a tiny, 10-step corridor between the locked front door and the elevator. From that moment on, a desperate race against time began. Relatives and investigators would turn the entire district upside down looking for a single clue, until the authorities realized a terrifying fact. This was no random disappearance. Behind the facade of an ordinary concrete apartment block hides a mystery that to this day simply defies all logic.
The scientific district of Akademgorodok was always considered one of the most prestigious and safe areas in the city. It was here, in a typical rented apartment on Demakova Street, that 28-year-old Irina Safonova lived. Her life could hardly be described as secretive. Irina worked as a child psychologist. Friends and colleagues described her as a calm, rational person, whose main purpose in life was her 10-year-old son, Andrei. They shared the apartment with Irina's younger brother, a student named Ilya. The only unstable part of her life was her marriage. Her relationship with her husband, Vladimir, had fractured long ago. He had moved to Moscow, though he remained involved in their son's life. Irina herself was at a crossroads. It was during this period that an old high school friend re-entered her life, 27-year-old Alexander. And it was he who was destined to be the last person to see Irina alive. The evening of September 8th foreshadowed absolutely nothing terrifying. It was a classic autumn Wednesday. After work, Irina met a friend at a cafe, and later, Alexander joined them. As the night approached, the two of them decided to catch a late movie. By the time the film ended, it was nearing midnight. Alexander offered to drive Irina home. Their route took them through empty, dark streets. The city was already asleep, and almost no lights remained in the windows of the concrete apartment blocks. At 11:55 p.m., the car pulled up to the entrance of her building. Irina said her goodbyes and stepped out. Alexander didn't walk her to the door. In the quiet district, it seemed like an unnecessary precaution, especially since she was just a few feet away from the safety of her apartment. The man turned the car around and drove off. At 12:02 a.m., Irina punched in the intercom code. The heavy metal door opened and shut behind her.
13 minutes later, at 12:15 a.m., Alexander sent her a short text message to check if she made it upstairs all right. But there would be no reply. Irina's phone would fall silent forever. The next morning, Alexander tried calling her again, first on her cell phone, then her home phone. Irina's 10-year-old son picked up the receiver. The child uttered just one sentence, a sentence that would trigger this entire grim investigation. Mom never came back from the movies.
Hearing the child's words, Alexander hangs up the phone and immediately rushes to Demakova Street. Inside the apartment, he finds Irina's younger brother, Ilya, who had just woken up. His sister's bed is empty and hasn't even been slept in. Panic mounts with every passing second. The two men rush out into the stairwell, desperately searching for any clues. And it is here that a blood-curdling detail comes to light. It turns out that the previous night, about half an hour after Irina entered the building, a female neighbor was coming home. Calling the elevator to the lobby, the woman discovered a set of keys lying right on the floor of the elevator car. Placed neatly on top of them was a piece of junk mail from the mailbox. The neighbor didn't think much of it, assuming someone had simply dropped their keys in the dark. She picked them up and left them on a windowsill in the stairwell, just so the owner could find them in the morning. Ilya recognizes the keychain instantly. All lingering hopes shatter. It becomes terrifyingly clear. Irina hadn't gone to a friend's place, she hadn't gotten lost on the dark streets, and she hadn't run away. She had walked into her building, checked her mail, taken out the newspaper, taken a few steps toward the elevator. And in that exact moment, something inexplicable happened. The family immediately calls the police. A rapid response unit arrives at the scene and begins combing the area. Almost instantly, investigators are confronted with a chilling paradox. The distance from the heavy front door to the elevator is a mere 10 steps. It's a narrow, enclosed concrete space. Officers in K-9 units search every flight of stairs, the attic, the basement, and the trash chute. The result is shocking. Absolute zero. Not a single drop of blood. No scattered belongings, not even Irina's purse. No signs of a struggle or a body being dragged. To abduct a conscious adult woman requires brute force, which inevitably means noise. But a door-to-door canvass of all 36 apartments in the building yields a bone-chilling answer. That night, no one heard a single sound. A grown woman had been erased from reality. In total silence.
When basic logic hits a dead end, investigators turn to technology. Detectives begin methodically pulling all available CCTV footage in the area. And soon, they find the tape. A security camera mounted on a neighboring building had captured a section of the courtyard on Dimakova Street. On this grainy black and white footage, detectives see exact confirmation of Alexander's story. The video shows a car pulling up to the building at exactly 11:55 p.m. A female silhouette, Irina, steps out of the vehicle. She walks toward her building, and the heavy metal door shuts behind her. This footage became irrefutable proof. The young woman wasn't abducted on the street. She didn't get into another car. She had definitely gone inside. And crucially, the camera never recorded Irina walking back out. Since the supernatural has no place in a criminal investigation, detectives begin working the most statistically probable angle. Someone in her inner circle.
Naturally, the first person put under the microscope is Alexander, the last person to see Irina alive. He is brought in for intense questioning. However, his story is completely backed up by cell phone tower data. Pings from the towers confirmed that immediately after dropping her off, his phone traveled the exact route toward his own home. In the very minutes Irina was waiting for the elevator, Alexander was physically miles away. Next, investigators turned to Irina's younger brother, Ilya, who had been up in the 9th floor apartment that night. Could he have come downstairs? Could an argument have broken out between them? But this theory crumbles too. The brother was asleep, and a polygraph test confirms his account. That leaves her husband, Vladimir. Marital discord and a potential custody battle, it's a textbook criminal motive. But Vladimir has an ironclad alibi. Plane tickets, witnesses, and employment records prove that on that September night, he was nearly 2,000 miles away from Novosibirsk, in Moscow. One by one, those closest to her are cleared as suspects. The investigation hits a brick wall. If Irina wasn't taken by someone she knew, there is only one conclusion left. That night, inside the locked apartment building, there was a stranger. And this stranger had been patiently waiting for their victim in the darkness of the stairwell. If the camera lens captured Irina entering the building, but never recorded her leaving, logic dictates a terrifying conclusion. The young woman, or whoever abducted her, couldn't just walk through walls. Therefore, the answer had to be hidden inside the building itself. Police initiate a top-to-bottom sweep of the apartment block. This is no longer just gathering evidence, it's a full-scale operation in a confined space. Investigators knock on every single one of the 36 doors. Absolutely everything is searched: dark basements, the attic, utility rooms, trash chute alcoves, and even the narrow elevator shaft itself. At this point, detectives seriously consider the most horrifying theory of all. What if the perpetrator wasn't a random maniac off the street? What if it was a neighbor? Someone who lived right there, who greeted Irina every morning for years, and that night, simply waited for her in the lobby and silently dragged her into their own apartment.
This theory would perfectly explain the lack of screams and why the cameras never caught the perpetrator fleeing. However, the methodical door-to-door canvass and checking of tenants' alibis yield absolutely nothing. Not a single apartment raises suspicion. The basements are completely clean, and the attics are covered in an untouched, decades-old layer of dust. The K9 tracking dogs just spin in circles, losing the scent right at the open elevator doors. The investigation expands its radius. Detectives pull the files of known offenders in Ekateringorodok. They comb through dozens of garage complexes and the dense stretches of forest this science town is famous for.
Hundreds of volunteers join the search, and the entire city is plastered with missing person flyers bearing Irina's face. But it is all in vain. The ordinary apartment block on Demakova Street officially becomes the site of a perfect crime. A classic, locked-room mystery, dragged into the reality of a modern residential neighborhood, where a person can vanish without a trace, just steps away from her own family. When facts begin to defy the laws of physics, detectives are forced to think like the criminal. If Irina didn't walk out the front door under the camera's gaze, and she isn't in any of the apartments, there is only one logical scenario left. Blind spots. A detailed reconstruction of the scene revealed that the camera on the neighboring building wasn't all seen. Its lens only covered the building's awning and a narrow, illuminated patch of asphalt. The entire rest of the courtyard was swallowed by thick darkness. The abductor had a tiny window of opportunity to carry the victim through the unlit section of the street or load her into a vehicle pre-parked in a blind spot. But how do you explain the dead silence? Why didn't she fight back? The absence of screams, scattered belongings, or any signs of a struggle points to one chilling fact: the attack was absolutely instantaneous. The use of a high-voltage stun gun, a professional chokehold, or a chemical agent. The victim was neutralized in a fraction of a second, before she even had time to realize the impending threat. This detail completely shatters the investigation's initial theories. It proves that the person lurking in the building that night wasn't some random street thug. This was a calculating, cold-blooded predator, someone who had studied the camera placements in advance, knew the blind spots, and waited patiently for his prey in the dimly lit stairwell. Adding an especially blood-curdling detail to this picture is that set of keys, covered by the junk mail. Forensics experts are convinced this was no accident. The perpetrator intentionally dropped the newspaper over the keys, so the dull gleam of the metal wouldn't catch the eye of a passing neighbor. This simple, yet terrifyingly pragmatic move bought the abductor those precious extra minutes for a clean getaway. The realization that someone was capable of planning and executing such a flawless, phantom-like abduction inside an ordinary residential building is far more terrifying than any Hollywood thriller. Years later, the case of Irina Safonova remains one of the darkest and most perplexing unsolved disappearances in recent criminal history. To this day, the young woman has never been found, dead or alive. The criminal case isn't closed, it simply sits in the archives, waiting for that one random clue that might finally shed light on the events of that September night in 2009. Irina's son has long since grown up. The men questioned by detectives have moved on with their lives, and yet, that ordinary apartment block on Demakova Street still stands, holding the secret to a perfect abduction within its concrete walls. Until this mystery is solved, Irina's story serves as a chilling reminder for all of us. We live in massive residential complexes, surrounded by thousands of neighbors, blindly trusting the illusion of our own safety. We think that once we cross the threshold and hear the click of the intercom, all threats are left outside on the cold night streets. But sometimes, the darkest terrors are patiently waiting for us, right where we feel safest, just 10 steps from our own front door. What exactly happened that night? A brilliantly planned abduction, or a fatal, unbelievable coincidence? Let me know your theories in the comments. I'd love to read your thoughts. Stay safe. Check your surroundings, even when you think you're already home. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story.